Is it greed? Is it power? Or is it something darker? Perhaps a wound one refuses to let heal. For Victor Von Doom, better known as Dr. Doom, the answer isn't a single word. It's a constellation: pain, pride, brilliance, and an unbreakable need to control chaos. Doom is one of the most compelling figures in fiction because he is not a monster by accident. He is a choice made over and over again. The choice to turn every loss into leverage, every doubt into armor, every relationship into a chessboard. And that's what makes Doom the perfect mirror for our own psychology. Because the truth is, some of us might have Doom inside us. Not in the cape or the metal mask, but the urge to overcorrect our fears by chasing absolute certainty. The urge to become untouchable. Today, we will be diving into the dark psychology of Dr. Doom. This isn't to glorify a tyrant, but to study the machinery of obsession, perfectionism, and control, so you can beat them, transform them, and build a life that's powerful without becoming cruel. Victor was not born with a crown. He was born into loss. Latveria was a place where innocence was thin skin, where poverty sharpened every edge of the day. Victor's mother practiced the old ways folk medicine braided with ritual, and his father was a healer who tried to hold a family together in a place that punished difference. They were Romani, outsiders in a land that feared what it could not catalog. The first image that stays with every retelling is the burning, the mother bargaining with forces beyond comprehension, vanishing into a hellish bargain, her soul taken, her fate used as the fuel for a young boy's obsession. Then the cold, the father's death in the white silence of winter, a child left alone with the knowledge that the world could steal everything. This is the origin that matters for Doom's mind. Not merely the loss, but the lesson that rose from it, a lesson that said, never be powerless again. Where others might seek consolation, Victor sought mastery. Where others found grief, he found a problem to be solved. Control became the architecture of survival. Protection mutated into an imperative. If he could bend laws, natural, social, metaphysical, then no one could take from him again. What we see here is a classic conversion. Pain turned into project, absence into apparatus. The young boy's survival strategy was cognitive as well as practical. He learned to think like an engineer of fate. That pattern does not simply create a leader. It instead creates someone who treats people like subsystems in a much larger design. Victor's intellect was rococo in its brilliance. A scholarship led him away from Latveria to Empire State University, a place where ideas were traded like currency, and where he met Reed Richards, a man whose curiosity matched his own. Reed wanted to understand, while Victor wanted to master. The experiment that defined them both began as a mission of mercy, a machine meant to rescue a soul, to pry open the gates that had swallowed Victor's mother. It was a dream of reversing the irretrievable, but genius usually unfolds with arrogance. Richards raised concerns via his calculations, safety, variables, while Doom, whose early lessons taught him to trust only his judgments, dismissed the warnings. The result was not a redemptive miracle. The machine exploded. Victor's face was ruined, his plans scattered into ash. In the aftermath, he refined the first lie he would live by. His scars were not the product of his own miscalculation. They were the result of interference, of a world that did not bow to his excellence. To him, Reed became an object, a rival, scapegoat, and the mirror that could not bear to show his flaws.
Outsmarted the great Reed Richards.
If you've exposed yourself to the storm, you're endangering your life. You need help.
You always know best. So tell me, what happens when you superheat rubber?
The mask was born from the failure. It was forged not just to hide his skin, but to claim a new identity. Where some would have retreated into humility, Victor retreated into grandiosity. Where his accountability might have healed him, he chose to blame and then hardened his wound into a spear that aimed outward. His wounded narcissism, narcissistic injury, and projection explain his psychology of how the blast did not simply mark his face, but it ruptured his narrative. To survive that rupture, he reauthored himself as infallible, and the mask is the first draft of that lie. Victor did not simply disappear after the explosion. He traveled, studied and learned forbidden techniques of both science and magic. When he returned to Latveria, he carried both armor and doctrine with him. He didn't merely just seize power, he reorganized a country, and that reorganization is Doom's central paradox. Under his rule, Latveria became efficient and prosperous. Crime rates had dropped, and houses became secure. This is, however, where Doom's psychology shows its utilitarian mask. He genuinely believed his way is the only way that works. He framed his iron will as compassion. Without me, they would suffer. With me, they'd thrive. It is a seductive logic, especially to someone who has watched helplessness take everything. One of Doom's most defining traits is the combining of seemingly good opposed disciplines. He isn't merely a man of metal and machines, but also a practitioner of ritual and the occult. He builds devices that fold physics and chants spells that bend souls. For him, the technical and the mystical are instruments of the same end, reduction of unpredictability. The point here is his cognitive behavior. Doom's goal is to domesticate on crisis, where others would accept randomness, chance, accident, or the mercy of the unknown. Doom builds upon redundancy. He creates backups, replicas, Doombots, failsafes, contingencies within contingencies. This isn't only about his external domination. It is a mental model. The world is a set of variables to be minimized, and success is the elimination of surprise, is what he believes. That mindset has an ugly sibling. When the universe resists, Doom escalates. If a machine fails, he seeks a stronger machine. If a ritual is insufficient, he attempts to hijack cosmic entities. This escalation is an expression of the same belief formed in the snow, that any error is intolerable. And when every error is intolerable, you stop learning and start punishing. Punishing reality, punishing other people, and ultimately, punishing yourself. Two consequences follow here. The first is innovation. His mind is a workshop of inventions and arcane solutions that, when applied, often yield results others could not even imagine. The second is rigidity. His inability to tolerate the unknown leads to even larger gambits. And the larger the gambit, the greater the collateral cost. Rivalry can refine a person. It can also calcify them. In Doom's life, Reed Richards is less of a competitor and more than a mirror, a reflection that refuses to match the image that Doom wants to see. Reed's capacity to admit error, collaborate, and treat science as an act of communal discovery stands in direct opposition to Victor's solitary absolutism. Psychologically, Doom's interaction with Reed is textbook projection. Instead of internalizing the lesson, "I was wrong," Doom externalizes the blame. He invents a cosmic enemy to be vanquished and invests his self-worth into the annihilation of that other. For him, it's easier to declare war on a rival rather than to look inward at the messy business of their own responsibility. This dynamic does two things to him. It sharpens Doom's intellect. He obsesses, innovates, outthinks, and this traps his identity. His goals become tethered to beating Reed and to not have any other purpose beyond domination. That tether warps his motives. There is also an emotional economy at play. Rivalry simplifies, meaning life is an axis where the opponent's position defines your own. The cost of living by axis is that nuance is excised, and nuance is precisely where empathy and growth live. Doom has stood at the summit of power. He has wielded reality-bending forces, claimed the mantle of godhood, and rewritten universes to fit his design. There was a time in cosmic cross-sections of the Marvel mythology where Doom's name was synonymous with omnipotence. He remade worlds and forced reality to conform to an image perfected by his mind. And yet, in those moments of greatest triumph, his psychology lays bare its own poverty. All the wonders he authored, wrote, cannot resurrect what he lost. His mother's voice remains silent. The hole where compassion might grow in him is plugged off. What looks like sovereignty is, in fact, a fortress around an unhealed child. That hollowness in him reveals something crucial. External authority doesn't patch internal fractures. The pleasure of victory is transient in him because the source of the suffering is not external. For Doom, each conquest is both a temporary salve, ointment, and a reminder that the ache remains. He conquers. The ache persists. He conquers more. The pattern intensifies. It is in that intensification that tragedy swells. The omnipotent ruler who lacks the humility to ask for help. The architect who cannot invite collaborators. The sovereign who will not allow himself to be known. Even gods, it seems, are not immune to loneliness. The metal face that defines Doom is not only a concealment, it becomes his identity. Over time, the mask and the man both merge. Victor's social world begins to orbit around the image he projects. He interprets any reflection that contradicts that image as an attack that must be destroyed. This is a typical personality architecture. The mask is his narrative and his law. The mask protects him. To simplify, it reduces the nuances and makes his decisions clean, but it also imprisons him. When the measure of oneself becomes the measure of invulnerability and emotional complexity, it's repressed, and empathy then calcifies. To unmask a person like Doom would not be compassion, but catastrophe. The person behind the metal might not survive the removal of the story that sustains him, and so Doom persists, welding the mask to his identity, choosing the certainty of this role over the risk of being human. There is a personal tragedy in that choice. The mask that was meant to shield him from further harm ultimately prevents him from engaging in the one thing that could actually heal him, like getting into the messy business of being seen and forgiven. All of this is not just anatomy for a comic book antagonist. Doom's life is a caution. The patterns he embodies live inside many successful, brilliant people. The refusal to show weakness, the conversion of trauma into unexamined strategy, the tendency to weaponize competence as solitude. There are practical counters. Keep your rivals human. Treat them as incentives to improve, not as the locus of your value. Make mastery communal. Teach what you know and invite critique. Let error be ordinary, not existential. And when you find yourself equating control with safety, ask, what am I protecting from? The deepest irony in Doom's story is that the very strategy he used to avoid helplessness produces a life that is perpetually at war with itself. He built an empire to keep him safe from grief and unpredictability, and in doing so, he ensured that the one thing he could not bear, that is vulnerability, would never be allowed to surface and heal. He becomes, in effect, a living mausoleum. Everything around him gleams, and inside, there is a hollowness his titles cannot fill. The mask preserves as a narrative of invulnerability at the cost of intimacy, and intimacy is the one place that could teach him how to live without arms crossed and defenses high. Victor Von Doom is a map of what happens when trauma, talent, and unchecked conviction collide. He is a mirror that shows us the seductive promise of mastery and the quiet toll it extracts. He is a warning to us. The most dangerous form of power is the one that believes it is benevolent by definition. If you take anything from Doom's story, take this. Brilliance and drive are not the same as wisdom. To change a life, you must change the relationship you have with loss. Doom sought to eliminate the chance of being taken by simply taking more control, more law, more power, until there was nothing left to be taken and nothing left to give. Victor Von Doom will remain one of fiction's most foreboding lessons. You can conquer the world and still lose yourself.